Okay, okay, good day to all. We're moving right along. We have just four more Mishnayos to finish Masechet Sanhedrin. So today we're up to Perek Yud Aleph, Mishnah Gimel. And we're still in the midst of the discussion of the Mishnayos that have taught us about the Zokin Mamre. The Zokin Mamre, who is one of those listed in Mishnah Aleph, Av Elu Heina Nichnokin. He is one of those whose Misa's execution is by Chenek. So we learned in Mishnah Beis, Zokin Mamre al Pi Bezdin, Ki Yipolim Yimcha Dov Olam Mishpat, etc. And now the Mishnah continues. To explain another aspect, another facet of the halacha of Zokin Mamre. And that is that this Mishnah teaches that a Zokin Mamre, that this kind of a sage who rebels against the Bezdin HaGodol Shebirushalayim, such a Zokin Mamre is not liable to execution, to receive the Oynish Misa, unless the law, the din, the halacha that he rejects is of a certain type. We'll see in a minute what that is. So the Mishnah explains, Chomer b'divrei soifrim mi b'divrei Torah. The Mishnah tells us that it's a wunder, it's a pele, that there is a chumrah in a din derabanan more so than in a din d'oraisa in regard to meeting out the oynish misa to the Zokin Mamre. There is something stricter about a din in the Torah that is explained by the Chachamim. That means a din in the Torah that is stated, but is not fully understood, is not fully explained until we see what the Chachamim define and explain to be the meaning and the way of practicing this given halacha. Which means a din in the Torah that is not written explicitly, but is learned and understood from the Torah through an interpretation of Chazal, an interpretation that they have received by Mesorah Dorach HaDor, through Torah Shebal Peh. So there's something stricter about a din that is understood with the explanation of the Torah Shebal Peh than Midivrei Torah. There's something stricter about the Derabanan, about the Torah Shebal Peh aspect of understanding a din written in the Torah than an actual din written outright in the Torah itself. And the Torah and the Mishnah gives us an excellent such example. If this Zokin Mamre says there's no obligation, there's no chiyuv to put on tefillin. There's no mitzvah tefillin. Why does he say that? Because he wants to be over al divrei Torah. He wants to transgress the words of a mefurash pasuk in the Torah. The Torah says mefurash clearly, without any ifs or buts, that there is a halacha of ukshatem lois al yodcha uletritofos benenecha. So when this Zokin Mamre says there is no obligation to put on tefillin, he's poto. He's poto. He doesn't get the oynish misa, because the obligation to put on tefillin is written explicitly, openly in the Torah, and it's obvious to everyone that this Zokin is just telling us a baba maise, a shtus. The Rav says it very well. Tefillin Potter, says the Rav, She'ein zu oiro. This is not a psak. You can't all of a sudden get up one morning and say, you don't have to keep Shabbos. You can't get up and come and say, you don't have to eat kosher. You can't get up and come and say, you don't have to put on tefillin, because these are all mitzvahs miforoshos explicitly in the Torah. So this is not a horo. This is not a psak from a zoken mamre. And therefore he's potur from oynish misa, because he is not in the category of a zoken mamre when he says that. A zoken mamre is someone who goes against a psak of the Bezdin Agodo. Not that he goes against something which the Torah says before us. Then he's tam a balavera. He's not a zoken mamre. But if he says chomish titofois, what if he comes along? He says that in the tefillin you should put 5 compartments in the tefillin shel rosh. We know there are 4 compartments in the tefillin shel rosh. How do we know there are 4 compartments in the tefillin shel rosh? That's revealed to us in the Torah Shebaal Peh. That is, and when he says that there are 5 compartments, what is he trying to do? Lahoisif al divrei sofrim. He comes against a psak of the Chachamim, a psak that is based on the interpretation of the Torah Shebachsav by the Torah Shebaal Peh. As again the Rav explains, Shebemidas Soifrim, Chamish Ketofet says the Rav, Yishoro, this is a hero, this is a psak, this is a rebellion against the psak of the Chachamim. When he said that it should be 5 compartments instead of the 4, this is just being moisef al divrei soifrim. Still he's chayev. Why is he chayev? Shebemidrash soifrim, because in the Torah Shebaal Peh we learn letritofus, harei kan arba parshiyos. This is Chazal's interpretation, and therefore when he comes along and he says that there are 5 compartments, not 4, he is a zoken mamre, and he is chayev misa, in contradistinction to one who comes along and says, you don't have to put on tefillin. I paskin for you that you don't have to put on tefillin. That is not a zoken mamre. That is tam shtus be'alma. This is tam balavera, for which there is no oynish misa. Zog the Mishnah weiter, Mishnah Beis. Mishnah Daled, I'm sorry. Mishnah Daled. So we learned in the previous 2 Mishnayos that the Zoken Mamre comes after a psak of the local Bezdin where he lives. He goes against it. They go up to Yerushalayim. They come to the first Bezdin. They come to the second Bezdin. And finally they come to the Bezdin Agodol that is sitting in Lishkas Hagozis. And what did we learn? That when he returns back to his town and tells his people, still in all, that they should follow his psak, which was rejected by the Bezdin Agodol in Yerushalayim, so then he may then again be judged by his local Bezdin, because any court of 23, any court of Chav Gimel may adjudicate on Dina Nefoshes and capital cases. However, the Mishnah is going to teach us, in spite of the fact that back to the local Bezdin, they can now judge him to be Mechuyev Misa based on his continued rejection of the psak of the Bezdin Agodol that told him, no way, Jose, your psak is rejected, unacceptable. So the local Bezdin back home can judge him now, Lemisa. But with one proviso, when we finally give meet out the Oynish Misa to him, the Chenek. We don't give him the Oynish Misa in his own town. V'lo bebezdin shebiyavne, and we don't execute him in the bezdin shebiyavne. What's the bezdin shebiyavne? Let's understand that 40 years before the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the bezdin Hagodol already left the Lishkat Sargozis in Yerushalayim, seeing that the end is coming, seeing that the Beis Hamikdash will be destroyed. But the Chachamim, in their great wisdom, realized that in spite of the fact the Nebuch, the Beis Hamikdash, is going to be destroyed, still in all, we are able to continue for as long as possible, even after the continuation and the jurisdiction of the Bezdin Hagodol Shemisham Yoitzes Hiro Yisrael. So 40 years before the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash, the Bezdin Hagodol left Yerushalayim and moved to various other locations, to various other towns, one of which was Yavne. Of which there is the famous statement of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who said to Vespasian, Tein li Yavne v'chachamea. Let the Bezdin Hagodol continue. Nebuch, we lost the Beis Hamikdash, but the Bezdin Hagodol, which is such an important institution in the annals of the existence of Klal Yisrael, let it continue for as long as possible. So one of those stops was Yavne. So our Mishnah tells us that the local Bezdin cannot meet out the Oynish Misa to him, nor can the Bezdin in Yavne. But rather we bring him back to the Bezdin Hagodol in Yerushalayim, which means that if the Zoken Mamre rebelled after the Bezdin moved to Yavne, so we bring him up back to the Bezdin in Yerushalayim. These words, of course, are not relevant unless the court returns to Yerushalayim. Right? Because the Bezdin Hagodol must be in Yerushalayim in order for the Mishnah's ruling to apply. Because as long as the court remains in Yavne, the Zoken Mamre may not be executed under any circumstances. Because it is a Klal Gadol, it is a general rule that no execution may be carried out by any court except when the Bezdin Hagodol is in its proper place, in the Lishkas Hagozis. Otherwise, nothing can happen of that sort. So, Mali Nosel Bezdin Hagodol Shigo Shalayim, and according to the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, we keep him there until the next regel. If the next regel is Pesach, if the next regel is Shavuos, or if the next regel is Sukkot, we keep him there until the Oil and the regel all come to Yerushalayim, when everybody comes to Yerushalayim, and then Umemisin Oisa Baregel, and we give him the Misa, we execute him during the Yontif, during Chol HaMoed. On the basis of what does Rabbi Akiva say that? Because the Torah says in Devorim Perek Yud Zayin Posuk Yud Gimel that in regard to a Zoken Mamre, his Misa must be in such a way that V'kol ha'am yishmu v'yirohu v'lo yezidu noid, that the entire nation will hear and be afraid and will not act in such a way willfully anymore, which means that this is such a davar chomu, that this is such a harbezach, that a Zoken Mamre goes against the psak, the often psak of the Bezdin Hagodol in Yerushalayim. He receives Misa and V'chol ha'am yishmu v'yirov v'lo yazidu nois. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. So according to Rabbi Akiva, we actually keep him until the next Yontif, when we will be able to mete out the punishment of Misa when all of Klal Yisrael is in Yerushalayim. Oy vey. But there is a very important phenomenon in halacha that we all know, and that is inui adin. Inui adin. You can't delay someone's punishment. If someone was paskin to get an oynish misa, it must be done that day. You can't wait around 3 months till Yontif. Comes along Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says to Rabbi Akiva, Ein me'anin dina shel zeh. You may not, under any circumstances, delay this person's judgment until the next Yontif, until the next Aliyah L'Regel. Ela memisin oisa miyad. We execute him right away, like we do to anyone who's a mechuyev misa. So like the kasha. So what happens to the pasuk of v'chol ha'am yishmo v'yiro v'lo yezid v'noid? What happens to the pasuk that says that the entire Klal Yisrael, the entire nation, will hear and be afraid and not act in such a way anymore? What happens to that? So Rabbi Yehuda answers that the way by which to accomplish that v'chol ha'am yishmo v'yiro is v'choisvin v'sholchin shluchim b'chol ha'mekomos. We write messages and we send them with messengers, with shluchim, to all places where Jews live. And what do those messages say that are brought by these shluchim? The messages say, Ish ploini ben ish ploini nischayev misa bebezdin. So-and-so person, so-and-so, the son of so-and-so, was sentenced to death in court, in Bezdin, for having rebelled against the Bezdin HaGodol Sheb'Yerushalayim. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, this arrangement of sending the message with the shluchim meets the Torah's requirement, because the Torah says v'chol ha'am yishmeu. Yishmeu, they should hear. It doesn't say that v'chol ha'am should see the actual execution of this Zoken Mamre. Okay, we'll stop here.